Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I've made it out to Langdon Hills, to one of the nature reserves here, which is absolutely fantastic. I've been here a couple of times and never actually brought my camera, which is a great shame really, but hopefully having a bit of a walk around today in fantastic conditions. Got lovely sunshine, fluffy clouds in the sky, so you've got the detail there as well, and hopefully seeing what images that I can capture today. So yeah, a bit different from some of my previous videos in the Ogwen Valley in North Wales, but great to be back on home soil and local areas is definitely where I love to do my photography. Finding these little pockets of nature still within a very sort of urbanised area of the country is absolutely fantastic, and one that we need to cherish as much as possible. And hopefully today, looking at some of the images that I can capture of some sort of vast vistas that I can actually get here, because we are on a little bit of an elevation. It's nothing like that I was in the Ogwen Valley that I was experiencing. However, there is a bit of a hill. Walking up from the car park does get the heart rate going and the breathing going, but all good for the energy and good for the well-being as well. But yeah, hopefully today work out to be a really good shoot. So let's come along for the journey. So I've just got the camera set up here, looking out across this fantastic view. Where I am at Langdon Nature Reserve there's a little bit of an elevation here, nothing like what I was experiencing a few weeks back in the Ogwen Valley. But yeah, at least there's a bit of a hill, bit of sort of getting the heart working, a bit of exercise, bit of well-being, etc. But yeah, I've got this view in front of me here, looking out across all of the industrial and agricultural area that we have around the Essex countryside. There is a lot of that around. Unfortunately, there's nothing like this sort of wilderness that I had in the Ogwen Valley, but that's the conditions that I've got, and that's what's on my doorstep. And that's what I love about shooting on your doorstep, is you've got to use these conditions to your advantage. Now, luckily, because there is the agriculture, they're growing a lot of the mustard seeds, the yellow mustard seed fields. So there's pockets of the mustard seed fields right across the landscape here, and I think that's really going to work really well for this image, because we're lucky today that we've got some bright conditions, but we've got cloud and detail in the sky. But with the pockets of the mustard seed fields across the landscape, it's going to work, I feel, really well as a black and white, because of the contrast between the greens of the rest of the fields in the foreground or in the ground, and then obviously the clouds, and working them into black and white really sort of make them pop that little bit more. So I'm making my mind up whether or not to go in the landscape orientation for this image, or decide to then do a pano shot. Because of obviously recently purchasing the L bracket for my Canon 77D, it's being able to utilize that function and using it in a pano function is a lot better when you've got the L bracket, rather than obviously dropping the camera to one side, and then it takes a little bit longer, and you've got that potential of error when you're stitching the images together because of the warped defects that it can actually create for the image. But I'm also considering as well with the image zooming right in, because I've got a great view of the Dartford crossing, the Dartford Bridge, which either love it or hate it, and particularly if you're stuck in traffic, you absolutely hate it. Anyone lives around and having to cross that on a regular basis will definitely know what I mean. Yeah, I may well zoom in using the obviously 18 to 135 lens that I've got here. I've also got my longer lens 70 to 300 as well, maybe just to sort of isolate that a little bit more and see what compositions I can come up with there. But yeah, for an actual location, one that I didn't really expect to find, to be fair, today, but very pleased that I have. So for the first image that I've set up here, the wind's picked up a little bit, so apologies if you're getting wind noise across on the mic. But for the first shot I've got set up in the camera in landscape orientation, and I'm being able to work the composition that little bit to actually create a frame around the image. So I've got the trees on the left hand side and a bush or tree on the right hand side as well of the image, and it's hopefully helping us sort of two bookends of the actual image to then lead the eye through the actual image over to the landscape in the foreground. So the image that I'm actually taking is f11 ISO 100, and I'm taking two exposures. One, calculating the exposure for the foreground and looking at the histogram so I can obviously balance that exposure, and then taking another exposure for the sky as well, because of that dynamic range between the foreground and the sky, as it is very bright today. Obviously underexposing for the sky quite a bit, so I can obviously keep that detail in the highlights, and then obviously blend the two images together in post-processing. So yeah, for the first image, working out really well. So I've got the next image set up here, converted the camera into portrait orientation, zoomed right into the Dartford crossing, as I said I wanted to capture as one of my compositions, and I love that image. It's got several layers going through it. So I've got the trees, or the head of the trees, sorry, tops of the trees, as in my foreground, then obviously got several layers of the mustard seed fields going through to the actual bridge itself, and then taking that exposure and then obviously re-exposing for the sky. So the two images I've got set up is one at or the f7.1 ISO 100, one at 500th of a second, and then for the foreground that is, and then for the sky is 1,000th of a second as well. So hopefully working out to be a really good image once I balance it together in post-processing. So for the next image that I've got set up here, I've just slightly readjusted my actual position that I had the tripod. Just coming a little bit further up the path, only probably about 1-2 meters. I've got around the bush that I had on one side of the image that was framing it, and I really wanted it there. However, it's just exposed another vista in front of me, and I'm looking directly straight over to the City of London, and it's amazing actually how clear it is that you can see from here, obviously 20 maybe 30 miles away. Yeah, really clear. So I've got my long lens on, zoomed right in at 300mm. Obviously crop sensor, but what I'm picking out on is one of the fields with the mustard seed in has 2 oak trees, I believe they're oak trees, in the foreground, and that's making really quite interesting foreground interest there. And then obviously leading through the image you've got another field with the mustard seed, and then obviously then into the commercial buildings, Canary Wharf, etc., around that area. So yeah, working out to be quite an interesting image, because the actual foreground is probably about a mile, give or take, as the crow flies away from me. I'm going for f7.1 ISO 100, and then taking 2 exposures again. One exposure adjusting the shutter speed so I can obviously balance that for the foreground, and then another exposure again changing the shutter speed to obviously bring back some of the highlights and darken down the image so I can obviously retain some of the detail in the sky as well. So yeah, working out to be really quite an interesting composition. 3 images, give or take, all within sort of one locality is really interesting. So yeah, well worth the visit to come out. So for the final set of images that I've got, I've decided to do a pano shot, because using the telephoto lens at 300, in our previous image that I was able to sort of get over to the sort of Canary Wharf, City of London area, obviously looking at a bit more detail, I've got those buildings on the left hand side of the image. I've got the Shard prominently standing there in the middle. You cannot miss that building, absolute amazing building. And then obviously further around to the left of the image, right of the image, then you've obviously got some other high-rise buildings in London as well. And taking several images across the whole scene here, using obviously the reach of the lens to then obviously take that image. So I've got the image or the camera set up on f7.1 ISO 100 and an 800th of a second exposure, because I want to bracket, don't I? It's then obviously compiling all the images together. I think having that sort of shutter speed will obviously balance the image, and I can obviously taking them all in raw, obviously then you can obviously manipulate it slightly when you're back in post-processing afterwards. But yeah, taking several images across that vista and then obviously working out really quite well as the final image, I think. So yeah, as a location, really unexpected. I have been here a couple of times on sort of short walks with the family around the lake and everything, which is fantastic to come to if you do live locally. But yeah, for photography wise, I think it's working out really well, because I've got that elevation, and there's no more elevation all the way through to the other side of London. Yeah, obviously you've got that ability to see that sort of greater landscape out in front of you. So yeah, really worthwhile trip today, really enjoyable, and there's conditions with the detail in the sky as well, just added bonus. Luckily the wind is not as strong as it was within the Ogwen Valley. For those that have actually watched my videos in the Ogwen Valley, you've probably seen several times that my vlogging camera fell over. When I was on Clanwyn Island with David Griff and Tom Peters, it took quite a nasty crack on the side of the body, but As one of the other YouTubers that I watch, and hopefully we'll meet at some point, Chris Sale, said that Canon cameras are built like tanks, and I can definitely concur that some of even the lower end spec of the Canon range is really built solidly. So luckily enough, it's not damaged to any serious impact. So yeah, working out to be still usable, which is an absolute plus. So, meeting my friend here concludes my vlog over here at Langdon Country Park. It's an amazing location, as I said. Great for coming out and doing one of the nature trails with the kids. So if you do live locally, I strongly advise coming out here and supporting Essex Wildlife Trust. So great charity as well. But for a location for a photo shoot, absolutely fantastic. I'm really pleased that I made the effort to come out today. Weather conditions were great in respect of obviously what we was able to capture with the sunshine, etc., but they're not always conducive for photography. Better to get sunrise, sunsets, yeah, great, but if that's not the time of day that you get to actually get out, any time of the day is best to get out with a camera, and that's the main thing that I've said many times. So yeah, really pleased with the images that I've captured today, and hopefully you've enjoyed it as well. So if you have enjoyed it, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you've already subscribed, absolutely thank you so much. The recent sort of rate of my subscriptions or subscribers has really increased recently, and that's a huge thanks to everyone. One particular guy I wanted to obviously credit for that is Gary from Reef Photography. Great guy, really chuffed to bits that he mentioned me in one of his recent vlogs, and for everyone that's come over from his channel as well, thank you ever so much, and I'm really pleased that you're enjoying my content as well. So yeah, as I say, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Thanks again to everyone that's subscribed, and until next time, take care.